point 90 are the additional voluntary contributions. There will be an update later on at the agenda. Otherwise, are there any comments on the minutes? I can see none, so I assume we are accepting these minutes as a correct record. Yes, thank you very much. Item number 2, question time. I have not been advised of any questions, so we are moving to item 3. And that is also to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda, and there are none. Thank you very much. We are now moving swiftly to item 4 on our agenda, which are declaration of interest in respect of items on the agenda. And if you could please indicate if there are any, and I see Councillor Shepherd is flashing. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you. Yes, in the Pension Fund Administration item, there's reference to East Midlands Shared Services and also to ESPO. I'm on the management committee of both of those, so I should declare a personal interest, I think.
Thank you very much. Are there any other items of interest to be declared? I can see no other hands up. So thank you very much for that. Is my camera off, by the way?
Yeah, it looks like it, Mrs. Chase. I was just about to message.
Let's try again. Is that on now?
Yeah. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Right, so we are now going over to the funding item, which is item number 5, and that is on your pages 9 to 22 on your agenda. And I'll just have to check my notes. Hang on a minute, because I am jiggling. So that is I can't find my notes because I'm working from 2 computers. But Ian, while I'm finding it, I assume it is over to you to introduce that report.
It is. Thank you, Councillor Page. Good morning, everybody. It's Ian Howe, Pensions Manager here. This is a report that follows the training that we've just had from Hyman's, from the fund actuaries. I won't go through it line by line, but I'll pick out some of the key points really. Just to reiterate some of the points that colleagues at Hyman's mentioned earlier. The fund has a formal valuation every 3 years. The next fund valuation is the 31st of March 2022. But what we've done is we've done a kind of a mid valuation position just to really assess whether the payment of the deficits are progressing as well as we'd like, and also to see if there was any need to change any of the investment strategies between now and the next valuation. So that's really the kind of the principle and the rationale as to why we've done this exercise. The colleagues from Hyman's are attending. They'll be here for this first item. So I just want to mention that if they do have any questions at the end, that they're here to help talk those through. So that was really the rationale as to why we've done what we have. I think the important points to make, whilst the valuation date is a date set in the regulations, and that's what we have to meet, it only gives the funding position and the actual position at that date. And obviously the valuation, as Tom and Richard have said, is the long term. It's looking long term, but we have to use that particular date. So as at 31st of March 19, the fund was 89% funded, which effectively means you could pay 89% of every pound of benefits. Now, the good news story here is that the position at the mid valuation is things have improved. And I think the three key points are points 10, 11 and 12 in the report. So I'm going to just mention those particularly. So the past service funding position in March 19 was a 537 million deficit. And that's now increased to only a 15 million deficit. So that's a very big improvement. And that's based on the fund targeting annual future investment return of an 80% likelihood. Now that also includes McCloud, so it's taken account of McCloud, some of the McCloud uncertainty. So there's been prudence built in. So that's a good improvement. The points Tom mentioned in the graph where there was the big fall off when COVID struck. The expected future investment return, there was a significant drop during the pandemic, but markets, as Tom mentioned, have bounced back significantly, probably more so than anybody really anticipated. So the position effectively is improved, and the expected future investment return over the 20 years is broadly the same as it was in 2019, with Hyman's estimating the fund's asset allocation remaining at 80% likelihood of achieving an annual return of 3.8%. And the other key point is the investment returns, as Tom again mentioned in the presentation. The future investment return at 2019 was 4.5 to meet a 100% funding position. And now, because of the improvement, it's a 3.8% to make the 100% funding. So, you know, they're all good news. So that's helpful. What I think we do need to take account of is the primary and secondary rates, because I think this is important. Now, the primary rate covers the cost of future benefit accrual, and the secondary rate covers the cost of the benefits already accrued. Excuse me. Now, the primary rate, the expected cost of primary rate contributions is slightly increasing, and that's because of a sort of a more pessimistic economic outlook in the longer term, with lower yields expected. But on a more positive note, the secondary rate, the costs are going down slightly due to the improved funding position. So, excuse me, so one slightly is not so good and one is slightly better. So what does that really mean to employers? Because that's ultimately what the employers are most keen on. Well, how does that actually impact on our employer rates? Now, the employers, as we've already mentioned, are split into separate groups, and then there's risk assessed to those groups as well. But without going into the huge amount of detail of that, because we're not at that point yet, the position looks fairly good, and it suggests there's going to be no sort of really major changes, although there will. Now, whilst that it doesn't impact, it's not a direct correlation. It's an exercise that's done nationally to effectively compare all the funds, and it basically tries to align the way that all the funds are being looked at, and then positions each one on a sort of a more level basis. So it takes away some of the fluctuations between the funds. As Tom said, the actual report isn't out until probably October time, but the position in terms of where we sit from what we're aware of is looking okay, and there's no flags or warnings been highlighted, which is good. You know, that's good. I'm conscious Councillor Shepherd's put his hand up. Would you like me to take a question now, Councillor Page? Is that okay? And then I'll talk about the timeline.
Yes, do that,
okay?
Ian.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you. And this may be something you want to respond to after you finish your other remarks, but could you just clarify the interaction between employer contributions and member contributions, please?
Certainly will, Councillor Shepherd. I'll do that now, actually, if I may. The employee contributions are within the pension regulations. So the employee contributions are stated within regulations, and they're on a banding. So depending on what person's salary is, depends on what they pay, and that's set. So it's purely dependent on a member's salary. So we can't change those. That's set. It's the employer's contributions that fluctuate to take account of the difference in the valuation. So whilst say for example there's a big funding shortfall, it's the employer that has to make good that shortfall, not the employee. The employee's contributions are set, Councillor Shepherd. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for politely correcting my vocabulary. It is, of course, employee, not member, I should have said.
That's okay. No, it's no problem.
Thank you very much.
That's okay. And then the other point I just wanted to mention, without going through it line by line, because again, it's in the report and it's early days, but really there's the sort of the timeline in there showing all the various stages. And you can see, without going and through it line by line, there's lots of different parts within this. So there's board, there's committee, there's Hyman's, there's ourselves in the fund, and we all have to work through this step by step. And you can see that runs all the way through to March 23, when Hyman's will produce the final valuation report, and then the employer contributions change from April 23 onwards. The only final point I wanted to just briefly mention was about stabilised employers. They are the sort of the tax raising bodies, the boroughs, the districts, the police and fire. What we're doing is we're doing that exercise a year earlier than the other employers. The rationale behind it is really twofold. One, it helps administratively for us in pensions that we can do one group of employers earlier than the others. But the main benefit is for those employers in that stabilised group. They will get an indication or a direction on their employer rates from April 23, a year earlier. So it helps them with their planning. And that's the rationale behind that. So I hope that was useful. As I say, Tom and Richard are here as well, so please feel free to ask any questions. Is that okay?
Thank you, Ian. That was very comprehensive and as always greatly appreciated. And in a nutshell, actually, I would say it is a very good news story. And I'm sure that the employers would welcome the position. I'd just like to add for the members online and the members who are, or anybody who will be watching us on YouTube, there is also an appendix starting on page 15, which gives further full details. I open this up to members for questions, and I've got Ruth. Over to Ruth, please. Ruth, you are on mute. You have to unmute.
Sorry.
Please.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Ian, may I ask, how does the valuation and the cost cap sort of relate to each other? So, you know, the government and the actuaries will talk about the cost cap in pensions, and does that directly impact on the valuation?
I'm having to think, Ruth. Cost cap. Now, I might have to ask Tom and Richard to come in and help me on this a little bit, but the cost cap is an ongoing issue, Ruth, in terms of the fact that at 2016, the 2016 valuation, the cost cap was breached. I think it was the 2016 one, and was on the low side. So therefore meaning that member benefits were to improve, yet you could still see an increase in employer contributions, which didn't seem quite fair and equitable. McLeod, I'm just trying to kind of cast my mind back here. McLeod then came along and sort of derailed the cost cap exercise somewhat, in terms of the fact that this was an unexpected additional burden, and the cost cap exercise was effectively shelved. Now there is a consultation ongoing in terms of how the cost cap can be resolved, and effectively what that proposes is to effectively reconsider those costs and to try and effectively, in my somewhat simplistic mind, reduce the cost cap. Dare I say the cost cap burden? That might not be quite the right word, Ruth, but to effectively negate the cost cap breach happening maybe as often, or if it was, to simplify that. But that's a forward-thinking exercise. It doesn't address the current position on cost cap, and I think that was the 2016. I think I'm right, not the 2019. So I think that's forward-thinking, but doesn't address the 2016. Now I believe we've taken account of it, and we've at least used prudence in this. But whether it directly influences, I'm going to have to ask Tom and Richard. Gentlemen, can you come in and just confirm whether what I've said is either correct or incorrect, and how that then potentially can influence the 16 position, if that was the correct values?
Yeah, I don't mind taking this one because I kind of, Tom's, unless you've got a burning desire, just because I've been involved in a couple of things at Hyman's, and it's a really horribly technical algorithm. This, as you know, Ian, it's horrendously complex, the actual calculations, and it's quite a bit trying to get a head around it. So there's two things. So yeah, the 2016 valuation was paused because of McLeod remedy, and the government have decided that the McLeod remedy is going to go into the 2016 cost cap valuation, and so the Government Actuaries Department, we are eagerly awaiting the final report on the 2016 valuation. Now, as things stand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, because this thing's an ever-changing beast, isn't it? We keep hearing things about it. As far as I'm aware, those improvements that you mentioned, you're spot on. There were meant to be improvements happening in 2019 on the back of the 2016 one, but that was prior to McLeod, so we paused McLeod, and we took a step back, looked at the cost cap again with McLeod in, because McLeod raises costs, because it's a remedy. It's actually improving benefits for some people, and so my understanding is that once the final report, the 2016 final report, which is now 5 years out of date, frankly, but once they issue that, we think that the McLeod remedy has brought the cost cap breach, it's dismissed that cost cap breach that was going to happen on the back of the 2016 initial report. So those improvements Ian mentioned probably won't go ahead. I say probably because to confuse things further, there is a judicial review going on that the unions and others have raised about the whole cost cap process and the consultation, and the fact that they think actually it's a flawed calculation. So this is all, so at the moment we think the 2016 cost cap won't trigger any changes to benefits, but we don't know for sure. And there could be a challenge anyway once the 2016 final report goes out. There's another consultation going on, which you alluded to, Ian, which is looking at reform of the cost cap algorithm, the process itself, and that will apply to the 2020 cost cap. It's a 4-yearly thing, the 2020 cost cap valuation, and thereafter all future valuations. And that's the one where we're trying to reduce the volatility of the outcome. In other words, make it less likely it will breach. And so there are things like the widening the corridor, the breach corridor thing, plus or minus 2% of pay is going to be a wider corridor, and other things are economic check coming in, which apparently will stop the kind of outcome you mentioned there, Ian, that thing about improvements happening but rates going up in the unfunded schemes, which was a perverse outcome as well. So kind of in a nutshell, we think that the outstanding cost cap valuation won't result in any improvements, but there might be an appeal against that. And going forward for 2020, it should not be triggered as often. The government got a real surprise when it was triggered. The first ever valuation triggered a set of benefit improvements, and they didn't expect that, because that wasn't really, it's meant to be a long-term thing, not a short-term thing. So for the first valuation to trigger something was a real surprise. So I don't know if that's, it's very uncertain at the moment, the outcome.
Richard, can I just ask you one question? And I'm sure
it within the cost cap breach or not. Now we think we know that the breach has been avoided. I've got a feeling that might trigger another set. There's an issue about the spreading period. You don't think what they've done based on the calculation, they've taken the McLeod cost and compressed it in a way over a short period, and that's brought the prior breach back within that plus or minus 2% thing corridor where it doesn't breach. And I think people are thinking, why is it such a short spreading period? This is a long-term cost. Why is it being put into a short? So there's arguments there to say that the process is flawed in that respect, I guess, and that's the angle that I think it was the unions, was it, and one or two other bodies that put in an appeal against it. So, but
Ruth,
I haven't heard the latest in this.
No. Does that help, Ruth? I know that it's complex and it remains ongoing, but does that help with the current position?
Yes, I mean, I think what I draw from that is that, I mean, obviously, like you say, it's complex, there's uncertainty, but future valuations may have to take account of anything that does come out of the cost cap if there is a breach. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So if there's any changes at all to benefits or to contribution rates for employees, that's the other thing it could change. We would build it into the next valuation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Now, that gave a quite comprehensive overview, and we looked into this. So are there any further questions before I move on? And I can see no hands up. So that means everybody is very happy, and that just remains for me to again thank Tom and Richard and Ian for introducing the report. And I close this item and move on to the next item. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. Now, the next up is the Pension Fund Administration report, April to June 21, quarter one. That is on your agenda, page 23 to 46. And again, it is over to Ian to introduce that. And Ian, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to say, I do apologise if my voice starts to go. I've had a bit of a problem with, believe it or not, a saliva gland, and it does affect my throat, and I do have to drink occasionally. So I do apologise if I stop midway through, but I will continue to do so.
That's okay.
Thank you. So this is the normal quarterly admin report, April to June. It's quite a long report. We do cover quite a lot in here. The purpose being that this allows the board to consider the points in the report, and if there's anything that you feel you want to raise as concerns to the committee, then this covers those areas. This is a part of the governance of the fund in order for that to happen. So I won't propose we go through every point, but there are some key bits that I do want to point out. The key performance indicators, we're continuing to receive a huge amount of work coming into the pension section, and to assist the payments and taxation team, who primarily deal with retirements, deaths and annual allowance. We're moving resource from the early leavers team to help assist them. That will help speed up the payment of benefits and to deal with deaths, because they are areas that we do need to improve. So we've increased the resource in those areas. The preserved benefits in section 6, which is the figures, the preserved benefits remain higher than we would ideally like. We're concentrating our efforts on the employers, the stabilised employers at the moment, and that touches on what we've just been talking about in the previous report. Because we're doing their valuation a year earlier, we're getting as many of the preserved benefits completed for the stabilised employers as possible throughout the remaining period of August and September, prior to the valuation data being submitted for the stabilised employers. All the other areas, whilst they're high, they're manageable, they're in control. Aggregations are still high, but gradually reducing, and that's good. So it's the preserved benefits which is where the key area of work is being concentrated. I did want to mention data improvement on point 10 and iConnect, and I just want to kind of link that, if I may, to the year end. This was the first year end where we've really seen the benefit of iConnect. iConnect's the monthly posting of contributions from the employers. This has really helped us this year round. The year end, I beg your pardon, has really been a lot smoother and a lot more efficient for us to administer because of iConnect, and that's been really helpful. There are a remaining group of employers that are still being phased to do the implementation of iConnect, and that's progressing positively. In terms of year end, I wanted to mention that because obviously it's year end in literally a few days' time now. 31st of August, we have to get the annual benefit statements to all the scheme members. That's the statutory deadline. I wrote this report at 16th of July, excuse me, because I was going on leave. So the position has moved quite a bit since then. And we have had success with all of our employers other than 2. The 2 employers that we've not managed to complete are 2 very small employers. And I do have figures from my colleagues this morning in terms of how many annual benefit statements are being run. Just bear with me. We have confirmation that 34,000 annual benefit statements are being run for active members by the statutory deadline, and 15 members are not getting annual benefit statements. So 15 out of nearly 35,000, which I think is good. It's pretty good. Shame we couldn't get the final 2 employers to engage, but they are employers that haven't yet finalised their admission agreements, and that's been the delay on those 2. The 15 members who aren't getting statements are being written to being told why they're not getting statements, and those employers are aware. There is a point in here about the cost cap, which I won't repeat again. And it was the 2060 situation that remained unresolved, the point that we discussed in the earlier report. Excuse me. The pension code of governance practice, if I may, on point 26. The regulator has announced its intention to amalgamate the 15 codes of practice into one. There's going to be a consultation. That will be quite interesting to see how that takes place. I think it's a good idea. I think there's been 15 codes of practice, and bringing that into one will be helpful, because we can then use that one standard code of practice for meeting the pension regulators' requirements moving forward, which will be helpful. As part of that, what I did is I looked at our current funds compliance and compared that to the last time we looked at that, which was in 2019. And that's in Appendix C in the report. I don't propose I go through it line by line, but other than to say we have full compliance in all areas apart from 2, and they're not all board members have completed all of the pension regulatory learning, which I completely understand. And I know board members have tended to pick the areas that are relevant at the relevant times, and that's I think that's more than reasonable. I should also say, if the board, if the compliance does go under one code rather than 15, some of that pension regulated learning may require change anyway. And I personally feel that the Hyman's online training boards, that's kind of section 30 onwards. This is just to confirm that the government are pressing ahead with dashboards. This is the principle whereby a person can go online to one website and look at all of their pension benefits from all schemes just on one area. We will be feeding into that, so members will be able to view their benefits from us through the dashboard. It's a big exercise. It's a huge national exercise for all pensions. This isn't just local government. It's going to be an enormous undertaking, but we're aligning ourselves for that. In terms of the actuarial position, we went through an actuarial tender. I'm sure you recall that from previous reports, and Hyman's was successful. As you know, they've been our actuary for a number of years, and they will continue to do so. They won the tender, and we're delighted that they'll retain with us. They'll stay with us. And on employer risk, this is the list of the employer bonds and admissions that are outstanding. This is a little bit not as positive as I would have necessarily liked. This is stalled a little bit because we've been concentrating all of our efforts on year end. We haven't probably been quite as active in this area as we were in the last quarter. In the last quarter, we cleared a lot of these. This quarter, we haven't cleared as many. We also work very closely with our legal colleagues who are under a huge amount of pressure on other areas of legal work. So we do need to pick this up with our legal colleagues again and try and escalate this. The one thing I would say as a more positive note, we've now purchased Epic, which I won't dwell on too long because I know Stuart's going to talk about that in his improvement report, but that will help us track this a lot more easily. And Stuart will touch on that later on, but that will help us control and monitor bonds. But we will be having a conscious push on this in this quarter. They were really the key points I wanted to mention. But obviously, if there's any questions, please, feel free. I open it up to the board. Is that okay, Chair?
Yes, thank you. Another very comprehensive report. Are there any questions from any members? And Caroline, over to Caroline.
Hello. Hi, Ian. It's one question I have, which I think I tend to raise at a few board meetings, but quite clearly the Pension Service have got an immense amount of work on, and very complex work as well on a number of levels. Appreciate you've moved some resource around, but do you feel overall you do have sufficient capacity in order to meet the requirements from a staffing point of view?
Thanks, Caroline. It's a really difficult position. We have so many pressing issues in pensions, but I think this quarter is always the hardest quarter. April to June is always the hardest for us, Caroline, because we're going through year end.
Yes.
So I would say up to normally end of August, because that's when we have the annual benefit statements out and we're working on annual allowance, is always tricky. And then we start to hopefully make inroads again into some of the numbers, because the numbers are high, and I accept they are.
Yeah.
But we do have a number of pressing challenges. Valuation is coming around, stabilised employers. McLeod is a huge looming exercise that continues to loom. So I'm going to say yes. I work very, very closely with Declan and Chris on this, Caroline, and they're very supportive. But it is something I continue to monitor, Caroline, and it is a challenge. But I would say yes, it's been a challenging quarter, but we are.
You're okay.
Yes.
Lovely. Thanks ever so much, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think on that note, Caroline, I think we ought to tell Ian to pass on our thanks to his staff, because I think they're doing a wonderful
Super job.
So if you please do that, Ian, and I think if Kat can also record that in the minutes, it would be really great. I can see no further hands up on this. So before I move on, can I just ask for Kat, when she records your comments on point 28 in relation to training, as we have got 3 apologies for today's meeting, to send around another little note in relation to available training and links, if that is possible. So we cover that one more time.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, so then without no other hands, no other comments, we move to item 7 on our agenda, page 47 to 60. And I assume that is Ian again, after he had a drink. And
Sorry.
No, that's all right. I'm sorry I can't get you to rest your throat.
No, it's fine. I wish it was. I wish it wouldn't keep doing this. I do apologise.
No, carry on, Ian. I'm sorry.
I'll try and keep this one brief. This is the risk management and internal controls. This is the pension fund risk register, which we bring to both board and committee. There is very little for me to say on this report, in actual fact, other than 2 of the risks have been reduced, which is good. Missing data being received from the employers from a cloud exercise, that's starting to filter in from the employers and moves in positively. So that's good. We were concerned that some of the employers may not be able to provide this, or indeed maybe many of the employers couldn't, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So that's good, hence the risk is reduced in that area. And the other one is the Prudential. The Prudential are actively working with us. I do appreciate we've got a report later in the meeting, which we'll discuss, but principally it's been reduced because the Prudential are working positively with us and they are implementing the improvements, although we'll talk about that in greater detail later in the meeting. The other thing I did want to mention is the risk register is always shared with internal audit before it comes to the board and committee, and they're satisfied with the current position, which I think is important to note. That's all I was going to say, unless there's any specific questions on any of those.
Good, and I can see no hands up, and that means you can rest your throat now, because item 8 is over to Stuart, and that is on your agenda on page 61 to 68. Over to you, and welcome, Stuart. Nice to see you.
And you. Thank you, Councillor Page. Good morning, everyone.
This is the now regular report covering various areas of administration where we're trying to make improvements in existing processes. Member self-service is the first area on the report. The latest member self-service take-up figures have been included in the report, and they show an increase of just over 1,000 members either fully or partially registered for the system. An article is due to be published on the County Council intranet in early September, publicising member self-service. This will coincide with the latest production of the annual benefit statements that Ian's already touched upon, which will be published to the system by the end of the week. Leicestershire Police have also been publishing a regular article now since June, encouraging members to register, and other employers have been contacted at the end of July and were asked to distribute a message to their scheme members promoting registration in order that they may view their annual benefit statements. So hopefully over the next month or so we should see a further increase in registrations. Next section was the bulk and deferred refund calculations. The latest release of the pensions administration system now allows for some automation of calculations to be performed in bulk. There are two areas, quotations of refunds and deferred pension calculations. Both areas are subject to a fixed criteria, the main condition being that cases can only consist of post-2014 membership. This is because prior to that date, the way pensions were calculated were fundamentally different and less suited to automation. The process requires all data to be held on the record prior to the running of the calculation, and because of this, the development is particularly suited to those records where the member's employer has signed up to iConnect. At the time of writing, there was a 92% of active scheme members that have their records updated through iConnect. So most of them will be covered, should be covered by this, and it's only a relatively low number of members that will be excluded from this process. So we're currently trialling the process, identifying issues and trying to establish how to address them. For example, a change in approach will be required to identify which cases can be processed automatically and which still require manual input. It's clear, whilst there are obvious benefits, that there are other issues to consider. And since writing this report, which is probably about 3-4 weeks ago, cases where a member has more than one record do not seem to work correctly. So we are currently trying to establish how to identify those cases automatically. Just wanted to touch upon the next section, customer satisfaction surveys. When we calculate a retirement case or estimate, a customer satisfaction survey is issued to a scheme member. These have been a really useful way of getting feedback from our members, and all this feeds into the quarterly admin report that Ian produces for the board. However, the number of surveys that have been completed and returned to us have dropped in recent months, which directly fits in with the shift to member self-service and the move away from paper documentation for those registered with MSS. So when a letter was posted, a paper survey and a prepaid envelope was provided. But for member self-service members, a link to an online survey has been included in the email that is sent to them to tell them that their documents have been uploaded. So we're trying to come up with different ways to increase the take-up. Since July, a separate email is issued in the month following when the casework was issued, and early indications are that this has increased the take-up slightly. We will continue to monitor this
and have a think about whether there are anything else that we can try to improve those the rate of surveys. And I just wanted to talk about EPIC, which again Ian mentioned a few minutes ago. So following on from the section covering employer risk in the previous continuous improvement report at the last board meeting, we have now purchased this new system called EPIC, which is developed by South Yorkshire Pension Fund. So it allows the recording of employer data information that we are unable to record in our main system, Altair, such as employer policies and financial information. And it also allows for a better monitoring of bonds, which Ian mentioned we were a key area for us at the moment. Plus the storage of key documentation such as admission agreements can be held now through EPIC. So we have just gone live on this in the last week and are currently looking to add extra information into the system. So we as part of our preparation for taking EPIC, we had some data already stored in the system, but now we've got a further exercise adding paper documentation that is currently held in paper form within the office onto the EPIC system, which will be really useful for those officers working from home. That's all I wanted to say. Is anything anybody wanted to raise at all?
Well, you're making such a good job, and it's been so comprehensive. I can see noddings, and I cannot see any hands up. So therefore, thank you very much, Stuart. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. And that brings us to page 69 to 74, which are the additional voluntary contribution. Now, Ian will present that report, and then we will go into private session after that. So over to Ian again.
Thank you, Chair. This report is a position statement really in terms of where we're at with the Prudential. I won't go back and repeat what we've been through before, because I know you met with the Prudential and ourselves, a number of you. We sent our letter to them, and they came back on those points, and that's detailed within this report. I think where I'd like to sort of position this in terms of a sort of a statement without going through it line by line, if I may, is we've seen, or I have personally seen, a significant improvement in terms of their responses. They are liaising with me. They're replying to me, and they are genuinely, and I say they, the Prudential, are genuinely keen on resolving issues and making improvements. And they are doing, but they're not there. They're not there. They're not completing everything as efficiently as they should be. And there's still definite issues to resolve, particularly around members' online access and being able to view their ABC accounts online, which hasn't progressed and is still far from complete. But what I would say is the Prudential are fully committed in resolving these issues, these remaining issues. They have done a great deal of work in resolving the delays. They are responding to members' complaints much more quickly. That said, there are still one or two cases that don't seem to be getting resolved as fast as I'd like, but generally they are resolving them much faster. I do wish to stress that this remains an administrative issue and it doesn't impact on members' ABC pension benefits, and that is still very important. So this is an administrative issue and remains so, but there is still work to be done. And I think it's important that I do make that point honestly with you, without trying your mouths or sort of suggest anything that I don't want sort of direct this, I would like, you know, your views. But I think where I feel we are is we're going in the right direction, but I would like to continue to monitor this closely, and I would like to bring a further report at the next board with a position as where we're at, and then maybe in that report consider whether we feel we need another meeting with the Prudential and yourselves, or whether you feel that we're at a sufficient position where we can kind of take it as business as usual. But you know, that's my kind of view as I'm here today. The other point I wanted to mention was a review of other AVC providers. We're working with
Ian, sorry to interrupt. Should we do that in private session? Stop here and then finish off and then do all of that in private session?
Yes, we could do, by all means. We can discuss that at the
I think
the next
that
stage.
would be better.
Yeah, of course.
So can I just, sorry for interrupting
no,
there.
Okay.
So can I just have members' agreement that Ian brings back a further report to the next meeting to evaluate our situation? Can I have a nod? Okay, there is a nod, everything all around. So, so that is decided. I will just then, hang on a minute while I'm looking at my notes. I will just then complete the couple of items on the agenda, and then we go into private session to discuss all of these matters in details. So that concludes item 9, with the recommendation to note the position as it stands, as outlined by Ian, and to bring another full report to the next meeting. We then move to item 10, where's any other business which the chairman has decided to take as urgent, and there are none. We then go to item 11, which are dates to note for your diary of future meetings, and Kat will circulate again to remind you, but she has already. The next meeting is on Monday, the 8th of November, but the following meetings, please note, are on a Wednesday to accommodate some members who cannot make the Monday meetings. So 16th of Feb, 4th of May, 17th of August, and 26th of October, all at 10 a.m. And we continue at those meetings to have small training sessions. I also would like at this point to thank members who are watching us on YouTube. I'd like to thank every officer and member attending at this meeting, and indeed the members of Hymans for the training. Thank you all very much, and looking forward to seeing you all on Monday, the 8th of November at 10 a.m. I will now go to item 10 on the agenda, and that is the exclusion of press and public. In order to do so, I have to read the following statement. The public are likely to be excluded during the consideration of the following items in accordance with section 100 brackets A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972 for exempt information. We're closing the meeting to the public at this point and move on to item 13 on our agenda, which is on pages 75 to 80, and that is additional voluntary contribution.